Hello everyone, in this video we are going to write the C program which will accept the floating point input from the user. So in the earlier video what we have seen is that we were entering a number which is of type integer, but in this case what we will do, we will take the floating point input from the user, right? So decimal values, we call it as floating point numbers, 1.25, 3.57 and so on. Okay, so what we are going to do is we will ask the user to take the floating point number into consideration and put it as an input in the terminal, and we'll perform a basic job. Let's take into consideration addition operation, right? So we'll perform the addition of the two numbers which are of floating type, and then we'll print the result on the terminal. So let's do this programming exercise. What we need to do is we need to include the header file first. #include stdio.h as the header file. Then you know that in a C program we have a main function, so I'm gonna write void main. I'll have the first message for the user, printf, enter the first number. Okay, enter the first number, and now what I will do is I'll scan the user input. So after this, what I will do is I will scan the user input. Okay, so I will write %f in this case because now I am willing to take the floating point input and it has to be stored in some sort of a variable. I'll take a, and now in a C program this is something which is a rule that if we are making use of any variable we have to declare it first. We have to define it. Okay, define it right at the top. It's always a good strategy. Okay, so I will write float, in this case float a. Okay, now what we'll do is that we'll print second message on the screen, printf, enter the second number, enter the second number, and then we'll write scanf, and then we'll write %f, comma, and b. Now here in this case we are taking the second number in variable b, so I have to declare it. So I'll write on line number 5 like this, float a comma b, right? So you can write a different line also, float a on line number 5, and then you can write float b on another line, but just to save on the line count I'm writing it on the same line. Okay, float a comma b, right? So this is going to initialize two variables a and b of type float. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to perform addition. Let's take another variable c and we'll write c is equal to a plus b, right? So again, a point to be noted over here that you're making use of another variable called c, but you haven't defined it or declared it so far. What we need to do is we need to go to the same line and we need to define it over here, float a comma b comma c. Now this entire gamut over here, a comma b comma c, indicates that you are trying to initialize three variables, a, b and c, and it's like the floating point numbers, right? So variable a, variable b and variable c of floating point, they are defined over here on line number 5. Okay, so you note that I'm using variable a over here, but it's defined before that. Okay, so in a C program this is what we need to do, that before we make use of any variable we need to define it. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to print the result. So I'll write printf, the addition result is, and then you have to write %f over here instead of %d, because I am now performing floating point arithmetic. So the output result of addition may be a floating point number, and I'll write c over here. Why? Because I want to print c. Okay, because the result of the addition, this is stored in variable c. Okay, so now the addition result is whatever will be the result, it's a floating point number, so it's stored in c, and that's how we are going to get the result printed on the terminal. Okay, so now this program looks good in terms of syntax. The only thing is that you need to be very careful with the semicolons. You need to be very careful with the syntax that you are writing. C programming is case sensitive. You need to make sure that each and every aspect is checked. So looks good. We can save the program, and I'll use test23 as a name for my file, and the type is going to be C, and I will save it. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to go to execute and compile this code. So now the code is getting compiled. Now you can see over here 0 errors and 0 warning. So the code is looking good in terms of the syntax, in terms of the logic also. What we need to do is we need to go to execute and click on run button. When we run this program, see what appears over here. Enter the first number. What we are going to write is like 4.5, and the second number I'll write 5.5, let us say. Okay, so 4.5, when you add it with 5.5, the result will be 10.0. okay, so I'll press enter, and you can see the addition result is 10.0. okay, so now this is working perfectly fine for the floating point numbers, right? Let's give it a shot one more time. Click on run and enter the first number. If I enter any integer value, still it's gonna take. If I enter 4, if I enter 7, when you add it with 4, the result will be 11. So the result will be 11.000. So it's working for the integer numbers also, right? And when you enter a floating point number 4.543, 6.765, it adds and gives you the perfect result over here. Okay, so that's how we perform basic arithmetic on the floating point numbers. So in this video, what we have learned how to declare the floating point variables, how to take the user input and store it in the variables which are defined as floating type, and how to perform a basic arithmetic calculation. Here in this case we have performed addition, and then we have printed the result on the terminal, right? So that's it guys, that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.